Welcome into Press Box Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles, and with me, as always on our baseball talks, is Luke Jackson, our special guest, and he's at the special studio at 105.7 The Fan. Is our man Glenn Clark from the GCR show, Monday through Friday. And Glenn, thank you for joining us tonight to talk a little bit about the recent events that have taken place since the Orioles went to Dallas, Texas. And I'm not talking about the Kennedy assassination.
No, that's not a recent event. I should make it very clear that the opinions expressed by Glenn Clark do not reflect those
Of
of 105.7 The
105.7.
Fan, or frankly, I don't think Press Box either, or
No,
maybe even Glenn Clark Radio, to tell you the truth. I think I might disavow anything that I say here
all
tonight.
right. Well, we'll check it with Brooklyn Bass. All
Yeah,
right.
please do that.
Hey, let's start with the winter baseball meetings. And Glenn, your just initial assessment of the first two moves that the Orioles made down there. They made them rapid fire, picking up Tyler O'Neill in the 3-year deal with a 1 year out, and Gary Sanchez on a 1 year deal.
On Saturday, my feelings were this is good. This is the start of what can be a good off season. If these are your first two moves of a group of moves to come, you could stockpile all of this and come away saying that you've had a decent off season. I am really torn, and no one that I've talked to has made me feel like Tyler O'Neill is definitively someone you can count on as an everyday middle of the order bat, and it's somewhat closer to really good platoon bat. But I can be okay with that if that's determined because, hey, you got to find at bats for Heston Kjerstad moving forward. And we don't want to say it out loud because we don't want to say it to either one of those guys, but that's what we think this was more likely to look like moving forward is O'Neill and Heston Kjerstad kind of sharing things. I know some people would argue that Tyler O'Neill needs to hit righties anyway, just because he's still a threat to leave the ballpark anytime he's at the plate. So you got to have him there. But a year ago the numbers were obviously dreadful, dreadful against righties, and of course, he's constantly hurt, and that's obviously a part of the conversation about Tyler O'Neill. But we all kind of knew there had to be a backup catcher. I don't think anybody would have been bothered by it being James McCann again, but maybe James McCann said, "Hey, if you're just planning on bringing up Basayo and I'm going to be out of the mix by Memorial Day, then I don't want to be around for that," and I wouldn't blame him for that whatsoever. So the moves they made, just in a vacuum, if you separate the is he as good as Anthony Santander? If you separate any of those judgments, you can quantify the moves that were made and say these are fine moves, and if paired with a couple more things, can be part of a solid offseason.
Luke, the other thing that they did, picking up Gary Sanchez, I'm just surprised a little bit at the dollars. Gary Sanchez made $3 million last year with the Milwaukee Brewers. Didn't have like a season that looked like it warranted a major raise for him, and the
Yeah,
Orioles are paying him $8.5 million.
yeah, he's a better bat than McCann, and he's always been able to provide power no matter where he's been. I think he's been in New York, he's been in Minnesota, and he was with San Diego. Then he was with Milwaukee, and I assume that the Orioles targeted him early in the offseason, and Gary Sanchez's agent probably said, "If you hit this number, you've got him." No more
Mm-hmm.
negotiating. And they said yes. I'm guessing that's what happened. And yeah, I was a little surprised that it was as high as 8.5, but that's the open market nowadays. Like if you want someone, you're gonna have to pay.
If they get the catcher, the hitter, Glenn, that was in San Diego in 23, and you left out one team, Luke. He was briefly with the Mets, total bust with the Mets in 23. San Diego took a flyer on him, and I think he hit like 19 home runs
Mhm.
in about 80 games with the Padres. They've got themselves a nice right-handed bat who can DH, play a little first base, and catch.
Yeah, and I would add into that, like when you allude to the first base thing, I brought this up with Sema Basayo. Again, it's how are we viewing this? Because if it's as simple as saying, well, it's he and Adley Rutschman until Basayo gets here. Well, do we know definitively that Ryan Mountcastle is on this team next season? And if he's not, then are there more at bats that are there to be had for some combination of these players? And if that's the case, then because it wouldn't make any sense to, yes, to your point, be giving $8.5 million to someone who might not have a role
Right. Who's going to
in a
catch
perfect
35 or 40 games or
right.
something? That
Exactly
doesn't
right.
make much sense to me. Um, when you threw out to me the most glaring area that I think the club is going to need to upgrade in is Ryan Mountcastle. I've not been a huge fan of his. There have been times I've admired. He's a tremendous athlete, worked himself into being more than adequate at first base, almost gold glove level, not quite, but he's good there. But way too much swing and miss, way too easy to pitch to for me. Um, there's a rumor, not a rumor. Andy Koska wrote about it apparently, or took an article from Ryan Devish from the Seattle Sun Times that the Mariners are apparently looking for veteran first baseman to offload Luis Castillo, who Luke, you and I went over it before we went on the air. He makes 25 a year for the next 3 seasons. We don't think he's a high level one. He's a high two, low one in there. Um, do you see that as a real possibility?
Yeah, apparently, as you said, Seattle's looking for a veteran right-handed first baseman, and that fits Ryan Mountcastle. And on the Orioles end,
Yeah, they didn't say they wanted a veteran who's very productive all the time.
yeah, so I would imagine it would have to be Mountcastle plus.
Yeah.
And if you got Castillo coming back, yeah, that would certainly help the Orioles. And he's on a very fair contract, and I don't know how that would work in terms of what other prospects you would have to fit in, but also Mountcastle's time maybe is coming to a close here just because you also have to figure out what to do with Kobe Mayo.
Yeah.
Because for me, Jordan Westburg is your third baseman. And I don't think Mayo can play a major league third base anyway. So for me, he's always been a first baseman. He has the arm to play right field, but I've never seen him track a fly ball. I don't know if they've ever asked him to do that in workouts. So for me, he's probably a first baseman, and to me, he's shown that he can handle AAA pitching. Like he's got to play in the major leagues. For me, quite a bit this year to show, or at least get a extended trial to show that he can handle it. And it's hard to do that if you have Ryan Mountcastle at first base. So maybe there is a match between Baltimore and Seattle where you have a starting pitcher coming back to Baltimore and then a bat plus prospects going to Seattle. Maybe there is something,
Would
a match to
would
be
that
made there.
would that plus for Mountcastle plus for Castillo, could that be Yenier Cano? A meaningful bullpen arm. Is that
Could
enough?
be, could be.
Did the
It
Orioles have the
doesn't.
bullpen depth to make that move?
Yeah,
I think that.
right
I
now the
think that.
Orioles only really have like six relievers who you would, if they're healthy, who you would pencil into the bullpen right now.
I think there's a ton of relievers still out there that the
Yeah,
Orioles can pull a
and
couple off.
you can find relief depth in camp. Sometimes you can find relief depth 3 days before the season starts.
And I got to be honest, I think that's where Chase McDermott fits in this year.
You're probably right. You're
Yeah.
probably right on
I
that.
mean, I think they're going to
Although
take a
he
real
might,
hard.
Chase McDermott might also be a trade chip going out too.
Yeah, it's a
So
possibility. Possibility. Um, Are you disappointed, Glenn? I read some of the stuff on the internet that fans are so
Mhm.
cynical that they're already down that the Orioles haven't come away with Max Fried or that they never made an attempt even at Juan Soto. We don't even know if they've made an offer to Corbin Burns. Are you wildly disappointed in David Rubenstein's first winter meetings?
Yeah, I mean, if we only look at it in the winter meetings, it'd be unfair to say that because the offseason is not over.
Right.
The only thing that was disappointing to me, and I wrote the column that I wrote for Pressbox this week about it, was the report from Ken Rosenthal on Saturday that the Orioles would not consider, or that were reluctant was the word that he used, but he obviously didn't write this because it was, hey man, there's something there that they were reluctant to consider any of the pitchers that had turned down qualifying offers. And I can't fathom that still being a
Yeah.
qualifier that this organization is still caring about in this moment.
Well,
Like that,
where do we place our faith in Mike Elias telling us the truth about that? Because he has since said that that's not true at
yeah,
all.
and that's it's a real I don't know what to make of that, right? Because I don't think Ken Rosenthal pulled that out of thin air. I it's just not something that Ken Rosenthal would do. If this was someone else, then we could have that conversation about, hey, you were told that by the Tampa Bay Rays. That's not really the way the Orioles are. Um, and as I said in that, like, there's plenty of qualifiers to it. It might very well be that they would prefer not, but maybe they wanted to be in on Garrett Crochet or wanted to be on that goes off the table. And now, yeah, we didn't want to do this, but we are willing to do this. My only point would be like that can't still be it can't be that's still an operating procedure for the Orioles in 2020 in this moment where you have
especially
this
when you especially when you're going to get to comp picks for
correct
Burns and
a hundred
Santander.
percent it adds
Yeah,
to it, no
yeah,
question about it. But even if they weren't, Stan, like in the when you have this core of talent in this moment right
yeah.
now, it can't be. I don't know that the player that you're drafting with the 38th pick in the in next year's draft
It's
is
going
going
to
to ever
amount to
line up with
something
Gunnar
in three
Henderson.
or 4 years. Yeah,
Right. Like I
when
can't.
Gunnar Henderson might be gone.
Right.
So
The thought
yeah,
process has to be you have Gunnar Henderson right now. So right now still has to matter. And I think that's why, look, the loudest of the people that are screaming, they'd be mad about anything. But I do think there is something to be said for it it doesn't feel like there's a priority of capitalizing on the moment. It doesn't feel like they're saying we will do things that we normally wouldn't do because we recognize this core of talent is
right.
here and we're close. And I think that's the frustrating part. Now, if and there's nothing about the reporting that suggests that they're really going to land Roki Sasaki, but if in the next, 3 weeks they have Roki Sasaki and they do make the trade for Dylan Cease, then maybe we'll look at it a little bit different at that point and say, okay, they did capitalize on the moment. But right now, I think it is fair to say, hey, it doesn't feel like the moment is the priority. It doesn't feel like the thing that we all thought, hey, once the talent's here and you got the ownership in place, you'll strike. It doesn't feel that way at the moment.
Admittedly, I would say it doesn't feel that way right now, but of course there is time left, not of the winter baseball meetings, but there's time left. Let me get a word in for the Costas in. And then when I get back, I want to ask you both about the Orioles. And again, probably unrealistic to think that we were going to go from one really good season in 23 to win, Corbin Burns pick up, then the injury to Bradish to think we were going to win the World Series. But I'm wondering if there's a sense that they're not going backwards a little bit, just in the sense of how many question marks the club has. I want to talk about that when we get back. First, got to tell you about a place that's look what I'm doing here, Glenn. I know I respect you a lot, but there's never any question marks about the Costas Inn,
Not
is there?
Never.
Never,
There are a few
never.
things in my life that I would stand by the way that I stand by the Costas in.
But you saw what I did there. I
I
went from
did.
question mark.
Did.
Were you
Yep.
impressed?
I
Were you
was. That
impressed?
was, look at you. Every
Yeah.
now and then you remind everybody you were pretty good at this, Stan. Like every now and then.
The Costas Inn. Been friends with the Costas Triantopoulos family since the mid 90s. That's going close to 30 years. They've been at the same location for plus 50 years, Monday through Friday. Great nightly specials, whether it's seafood, chicken, pasta, steaks. And then, of course, they've got incredible crab cakes, crab soup, and those steamed crabs that are just second to none in town. 410-477-1975. Make your reservation in advance for your crabs so you can check out their availability, the size, price point. Make sure everything matches up before you show up at the Casa Sin. If you want to order online, CostasIn.com is the way to go. All right, Costas In. And we give them 6 thumbs up, don't we, guys?
Thumbs up here.
No question.
All right. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the thumb work there. My question about my question about the question mark.
Mm-hmm.
We got an Adley Rutschman question mark that's almost feels a little like an early Justin Tucker question for the Orioles. I mean, is he as good as we think he is, or is there something going on that's going to impact his 25 season the way it did the second half of 24? Jackson Holiday, number one pick in the entire draft, but comes in with, I don't think, like an abounding question about whether he'll ever make it, but is he a 1-1 type of talent?
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Mayo had that terrible streak. Ryan Mountcastle, Heston Kjerstad, and Ryan O'Hearn. Is the club in a way less certain than it was, or am I over dramatizing all those questions?
Yeah, no, I think it's obvious it's a fair thing to ask, Stan. I think that I'll tell you, the way I've been presenting it to like the guests that I've had this week on my show is if we assume a reasonable aggression to the mean for Adley Rutschman, don't make Adley Rutschman, Johnny Bench, but we assume that what we saw in the second half wasn't the true Adley Rutschman. If we assume progress for Jackson Holiday, for Colton Cowser, who, had a really good month and then was kind of a
Yeah.
guy from that point forward. Um, and Jordan Westberg is basically what Jordan Westberg was, and Gunnar Henderson's the best version of Gunnar Henderson. Is that group, is that core enough to believe that you have a World Series caliber lineup? Um, the one that blew my mind today is Mike. I put it to Bordick, who's we've all thought of as the eternal optimist, and Bordick blew up. Like Bordick was furious today and was like, "No, not and like that's the
Yeah, I think they're missing a stick. Yeah.
yeah, I think they are too, Stan. And look, it is possible that it is because Jackson Holiday this year becomes Jackson Holiday,
Yeah.
right?
All
That
bets are off
it's
if he and
right.
Kjerstad jump up.
Sure,
Yeah.
100%. But to assume it, to make that your operating procedure, to make your decisions in the offseason based on that, not something that I can do. At the moment, there's no way that any of us could feel like this lineup right now, we truly believe is a World Series caliber lineup. And yes, they internally might say, we know, we've got data, we've watched these guys, we know what happened with Adley Rutschman last year, we know how much better he's going to be. Maybe that's the way that they feel, but there's
Yeah.
no way that any of the rest of us could have comfort in that.
Luke, I pose you the same question. I mean, is it reasonable to say that we got a lot of question marks going into
No, I think it's
2025?
absolutely fair, but I would also say that you have a lot of positions that are spoken for. That we know that Cowser is going to be one of the main outfielders. Mullins is going to be one of the main outfielders. O'Neill now. We think that Kjerstad's going to get some run. Westberg's probably going to be the third baseman. Holiday's going to see a lot of time at second. Henderson's one of the best shortstops in the game, one of the best players in the game. So that really leaves you with first base and DH,
Yeah.
and maybe Mayo ends up being a guy who can really
Yeah.
help you in those spots. Who knows? And maybe O'Hearn gives you a little more consistency. I would say though that yeah, the Rutschman question is a big one because no matter what they do the rest of this offseason, this team is built around Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman, and they've got to get him right in order to maximize whatever this team is going to be. That's number one. And in terms of other internal questions, Grayson Rodriguez has to stay on a major league mound for 6 months. That's got to happen. He in the last few years he's had two what do you want to call them, lat injuries that have cost him a lot of time. And he's got to get over that and stay on a major league mound for 6 months to really show us what his true potential is. And that's a big one. There's no question about it. No matter who they bring in for the rotation, if they want to get to where they want to get to as a team, Grayson's got to be better and stay on the mound.
Let's take a quick spin around the free agents that are still available. Glenn, do you see a fit? Um, and Luke and I talked about it. I was going to write an article about it, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. That Golden State Warriors this year picked up Buddy Hield,
Mm.
and he, for a time, the first 10, 12 games of the year, he was really a big addition. And I said, that's what the Orioles need is a Buddy Hield, somebody that's a difference maker, maybe not a total superstar, is there still a guy out there that's somewhat affordable that you think could fit for the Orioles offensively?
Yeah, that's the part, right? Because like I feel like all of our attention has been focused on pitching. I know that you and I have talked a lot about Christian Walker,
Yeah,
and I'm I, I've
he's
been
going to
with
end
you.
up with the Yankees.
I yeah, make a lot of. Well, are we assuming that they're definitely out on Santander because Judge is going to play right field
Yeah,
and
I don't think they're going to be in on something.
okay.
I don't think so. That's my
Um,
good.
like it look, he stands out, right? Like he stands out as this again, look what Luke says is absolutely true. They are committed to short of being swinging for a massive trade that involves, Jordan Westberg. They are committed to these guys being the guys at an extraordinary number of positions. Maybe they could still entertain a world in which they move on from Cedric Mullins to try
Yeah,
to create another outfield position. I think that's a tricky thing to do while committing to the combo of O'Neill and Kerstead, who both of them have very little range. I think you really want to make sure that you're confident in the range of your left and center fielders. So
Yeah, and I would be surprised if they move off of Cedric just because when he's right, it's an above league
yeah, he
average
gives you
bat,
something. There's
and
something that
he
you don't
can.
have, right?
And it's hard to, sometimes he can go through long slumps. We've seen that, but overall, it's a slightly above
I,
league average bat in center field. That's not easy to find,
I
yeah,
especially
agree.
someone
and
who,
his speed factor is a
No,
and I
real.
know,
100%.
I mean, and he's affordable, and who knows, maybe they think that they can get like one more big year out of him, and
You
before he
know, the other
ages.
player
It's a
we
big year
haven't,
for it's a big year for Cedric, no
no
doubt about
question about it. One of the players we haven't mentioned that Brandon Hyde really likes, and we all know this, is
Mateo.
Jorge Mateo.
Yep.
Is and he makes a good point. When Mateo's in the lineup and hitting well, and he's an impact player offensively with his speed.
Yep.
I
Oh,
mean,
100% yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Look,
and they missed him when he was gone because they were so left-handed heavy, and they
yeah,
didn't have and I mean that was one of the big issues they had down the stretch last year, is that they were carved up by anyone who threw left-handed. And so I was not at all surprised that they picked up Tyler O'Neill because they needed someone who could crush left-handed pitching. He can do that. He can definitely check that box for you.
yep.
Luke, real
100%.
quick, is there a guy out there that you see that's out there, an offensive player that's available that makes any sense for you?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago I would have said Tyler O'Neill makes a lot of sense for what they
Right,
need.
he did. And Sanchez in some ways makes sense.
Yeah, Sanchez, I mean, obviously he's got big numbers at Camden Yards, but he's not
But I'm
facing the
talking about somebody that's
2019
still
Orioles
out
staff
there.
anymore. Um,
By the way, Stan, again, you'd have to tell me where he's playing and what it looks like. And this goes
yeah,
back to
it
our
would have to, for
conversation.
me, it would probably have to be like a first base DH
First
type.
baseman DH. Yeah.
But
And
is Teoscar Hernandez still in that category?
he's,
I don't think
like,
they've got the dollars. He's
I
going to
agree with
command.
that part. Yeah, that part I agree with is that they're
would he be
not.
a good fit? Sure.
He'd
Yeah.
be great.
He would be a
He'd be
good fit
great.
on 30 teams, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Last thing before we go. Have the Yankees or Red Sox done anything that has scared you, spooked you?
well, I think Max Fried is a really good fit in New York just because I know it's a long deal for Max, but they're just really, they need him to be really good for the next few years while Judge and Cole are still in peak form. That's really what they need from it. And after that, it's whatever. It's the price of doing business. So I
Yeah.
think that's a good fit. Crochet, I mean, I really like him. I mean, he's got an electric fastball. I think he'll probably fit well in Boston. That makes a lot of sense to me.
There's
But
rumblings. There's rumblings that the Red Sox are not done yet in the pitching market, and that they're still talking to Corbin Burns.
Mhm.
how
Would
much do
that
you think?
scare? Would
How much
that
do you think
scare
Burns is
you?
going to get?
I think he's going to get in excess of 250.
So you
I
think
think
he's
he's
going to
going
get
to
eight
get
years,
275.
like
Yeah,
8 years? Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
something.
he's plus Freed plus. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, that's what I'm thinking too. I
yeah.
was thinking San Francisco for him, but
I
maybe
think
that'll be
San
too.
Francisco or Boston ends up being the places.
Toronto apparently has checked in on Burns as well.
Yeah,
But I could see Toronto as a Santander landing spot.
that's
He's
where I
got
see
huge numbers in
Santander.
Toronto. I actually think he might have better numbers there than Mountcastle does. Um, and he could fit behind Vlad in that lineup pretty well, I would think.
Yeah.
So
I
I could see that.
I agree with Luke. I love Crochet in Boston. I like all the rumblings about Kyle Tucker being a fit with the Yankees. Like you add Kyle Tucker back in, and if it costs you, let's say heel,
Heal
Yeah.
plus. Yep.
you still keep a really good rotation together.
If I were the Yankees, I would do that in a minute.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Um,
Kyle Tucker is an outstanding baseball player.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
He's a
so
savant when
well
it comes.
rounded.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
Michael Elias draft pick, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact.
And
He's a,
obviously, I'm not trying to make him Juan Soto, but you put Kyle Tucker in with what you have, all of a sudden, I think you're probably it's almost negligible with where you were a year ago.
yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree with. I
yeah,
would agree with.
and
But of course,
he's
and they're gonna spend mightily in that bullpen. In fact, they just re-signed Jonathan Loaziga, and there's rumors they're going to sign Tanner Scott, who I got to be honest with you, I think that's the one spot that he could collapse
I'll get it. Yeah.
in New York. But we'll see. They're
would you be
talking about
nervous
like
about giving him like a 4-year deal, Stan?
$56 million for that. The arm is worth it. I'm not sure I like it in New York. It's a big difference between finishing up games in Miami when there's 4,000
Oh,
people
he
in the
was electric in
stands.
Miami, man.
Yeah, he's electric there, but we'll see. This to be continued during the off season. Okay. I thank Glenn Clark of the Glenn Clark Radio Show and part time over at 105.7 The Fan, doing a lot of good work over there. Luke Jackson, our managing editor, and we've got the best of issue coming out in the next few days, right, Luke?
Yes, I'm excited to get over the hump on that.
All right, you do that. All right, and Glenn, you do great work on that as well. All right,
Thank you.
I don't do much of any.
You're there for the meetings. That's what matters.
That's the important thing.
There for
You
support.
you did notice that I'm still at the meeting. All right. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. And thanks to our friends at the Costas Inn. And we'll be back more to talk. And I'll be on Glenn's show on Friday. That's it for now.